Bundle, 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 bundle. My rap style's boom bap, articulate, never mumble. Disney, Hulu, and Max just announced a bundle on the services websites to where customers will be funneled. Apple TV and Paramount Plus is a bundle. Everyone wants to be the one with the buzz like a bee that bumbles. ESPN, TNT, and Fox are now a bundle. A sports JV that Fubo TV hopes will take a tumble. Disney, Hulu, and ESPN is a bundle. I'm over the top, never below like a trundle. Max launched in France with Canal Plus, it's a bundle. You can catch me in a Parisian bistro, drink a German dunkel. Verizon has Netflix and Max, it's a bundle. This rhyme pattern is getting long like the hair of Rapunzel. But isn't Netflix by itself inherently a bundle? A collection of things wrapped up together that you don't want to fumble. The streaming wars is crazy. Welcome to the jungle. All my product of the 80s like Guns N' Roses and Mr. Bungle. Blinded by the light at the end of the tunnel. Zora issues subscriptions of Professor Genius to the Rundle. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble. Everyone knows the house is built with cards will always crumble. Tubies talk about MAUs. I'm not disgruntled, but Pluto TV is currently trying to get out of the stumble. You'll get exposed like Samantha Bee full frontal. Thoughts muddled on my head and the words just getting jumbled. The key to life is being hungry, but also humble. You could call me Screaming OG like we refer to Snoop's uncle. K from NAB, started writing raps to pass the time. Calendar blocked off every Thursday so I can practice rhymes. These days the LinkedIn platform is getting asinine. You could get ordained in 2 minutes. A thought leader only takes half the time. But look at me go, look at me flow. Prognosticator, I got the data. Hip-hop savior, you ought to know. Like Atlantis, built like Adonis. Raps on my canvas if I'm honest. The TV industry's my ball and chain like Janis Joplin. Or social diva more tenacious. I wish these companies on the earnings call were more voracious. Pulling the wolves over our eyes, can Bob Iger save us? Guess we'll wait and see. I stand behind these bars, pass behind me like latency. I got bars, I bring heat best. I got bars like Toronto and King Street West. I got bars that other rappers envy. I got bars like Venice Beach and Abbott Kinney. I got bars like cars on the BQE backfiring. I got bars like NYC.
Hello and welcome to the April Bytesize. I'm Benjamin, the host, and today we're going to be talking around the Subscription Signals 2026 report. If you haven't downloaded that, you can see there's a QR code just in the top right-hand corner. Get your phones out, scan away, and get access to that report. There's a lot of really interesting data in there. And we're going to talk about kind of three key themes that are coming out of this report. And I'm going to be joined by Giles Tung, who's a regular voice on this show. So Giles, welcome to the show. How are you getting on today?
I'm getting on very well, thanks, Ben. And every time I hear the song by Kirby, if it's called a song, maybe it's a tune or a banger, I don't know, it gets me going. So yeah, really excited to be here and enjoying the decent weather. I don't know how the weather is where everybody else is, but it's pretty hot today.
Yeah, I know. I've got my t-shirt. I was going to put my Bango hoodie on, but it's I think I'll be sweating and dripping by the end of this. So I'm glad I'm in a t-shirt. Right then, I think we should get into the content. We've got a lot to get through, a lot of key insights. So let's pull up some of the slides that are on here. So Giles, first of all, we launched this at Stream TV Europe. It was the first time they did this. We've obviously been a Stream TV sponsor for the last 4 or 5 years, but the first one in Europe, right, in Lisbon. How did you find the show? It seemed like it was a great success.
Yeah, it was. And, massive congratulations again to the QuestX and Stream TV team for pulling it off. We've been going to the Stream TV show in Denver for the last 4 years. And what they managed to do was transfer not just the look, feel and style, but also the energy and the general momentum of the show. It was really excellent. Nearly 1,000 people, as we see on the screen there, which is probably way more. I think when we were planning on attending, we were thinking, 400 to 600 would be amazing. So to get to 1,000 is extraordinary from a standing start. And honestly, I think Europe really needs this event. So yeah, it was brilliant, and a good mix of content providers, subscription brands, as we would call them, content providers, resellers. There were people from advertising there. So it was a really good show, really interesting.
And we obviously featured on a couple of panels, a couple of speaking opportunities. One with Marion as the kind of pre-event workshop. We went down really well, and then Paul, our CEO, also spoke on a panel with Warner Brothers Discovery. Could you just talk a little bit around some of the key findings and themes that came out of the show?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I was on with Marion in the Streaming Made Easy, and Vincent from Telenet on the panel as well, who was great value, as he always is. I think of the points we talked about, 3 things really stuck, and we'll go into them in more detail. But the ad acceptance, there's been a real reversal on people's opinions about or attitudes towards adverts within streaming. We shared some stats around top shows and whether they can be found or whether people knew where to find them. And Max related shows were particularly interesting. And then the average number of subscriptions that people have and how many of those are coming through indirect channels. So those were the 3 big points that people were coming back and talking to me about afterwards anyway.
Excellent. And also, quite quickly afterwards or around that same sort of time period, right, we had the Media Odyssey podcast, which is with Evan Shapiro, again, a great industry voice in the space, with Marion as well. And you were invited as a guest onto this to talk a little bit around some of the data from this report.
Yeah, it was great fun to be on. And Evan's won a Webby since then. So congratulations to Evan. Yeah, it was great being on the show. And actually, we didn't give them a huge amount of time with the data. So it was extraordinary how quickly they disseminated the data into not only graphics, but also into strong talking points. Some of the interesting points there were the as you see on the screen, the relationship between how many subscriptions that we have and the number of which are coming through indirect channels. The conversation around how long it takes to find content that you want to watch. We had some really strong data on that. We'll go into that later. And also the difference between the loyalty you have towards the subscription service and the specific content was really interesting. And actually a 4th point I'll add is the difference between Gen Z attitudes to pretty much all of the data and attitudes to some of the challenge we have within the subscription economy. They're almost indexing 2x versus the general population in terms of the problems, in terms of their workarounds to subscriptions, which we'll come to shortly.
Yeah, and I've just put on the screen as well. If anyone hasn't watched the podcast, you can scan the QR code above my head if I'm positioned in that place, and to get access to that. That'll go straight to the YouTube link. But you also can listen to it on the go through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You just search for the episode name, and I'm sure you'll come across it. Definitely worth a listen to. Right, Giles, let's get into some of the meat of the actual report itself. So. First of all, just to kind of frame the kind of conversation around why we did this report and kind of some of the key themes that are coming from this. So obviously subscription demand is still very much here and high, right? You can see on screen here with an average size of 5.2 and 5.7 in the UK of total number of subscriptions. And that's, equating to around $69 and an equivalent to $90 in the UK. So subscriptions are definitely still here. So there is no kind of reduction in the amount that's being there. But what is changing is how people are interacting with them and how they're accessing them. And, what we're starting to see from this report is they're starting to look and be a little bit more savvier on how they're selecting their subscriptions in their process. And they're doing it on slightly different terms. And that's how we're kind of framing this here. And it's all kind of looking at that kind of billing relationship between the subscriber and the kind of service that they're getting it from. They're maybe starting to look at different routes to get that subscription, and the access is changing. So that's kind of what we're saying from this, with this kind of great disconnect that's happening in the report. And if I go on a little bit further to the actual report itself, as mentioned, you can scan it by accessing using the QR code in the top right-hand corner. This is one of our flagship consumer reports. We're kind of quite known for this now in Bango. We produce these kind of reports on an annual basis, sometimes multiple times in different regions throughout the year. This particular survey was 4,000 consumers in the UK and US market. And we really want to understand the kind of subscription trends and what's going on and the kind of behaviors around how people are interacting with subscriptions. But, in previous years, we've done this, kind of looking at, I wouldn't say surface level, but we wanted to go a little bit further than what we've done previously. So we wanted to go that little bit deeper and try to understand this from a more commercial sense, trying to give real interesting insights to partners and potential partners to think about this in different ways and how to unlock this kind of channel through what we do, which is obviously subscription bundling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, we've done this report and found similar things about people. Really, we could summarize as subscription fatigue. Can't remember where they've subscribed, can't remember how to manage, where to manage, can't remember how much they're spending. And I think this time we wanted to move beyond that a little bit and look around the corner at what's coming up in the future. And what we discovered was a lot of different signals about change. And that's why we ended up calling it the subscription signals, the Great Disconnect.
So, Giles, do you want to talk a little bit around this particular slide here, kind of the diverse categories that we're seeing in the report?
Yeah, so it's probably a good moment to mention a slight change in methodology that we had versus last time. So in previous years, we've used a screener of I have at least one paid subscription. We did away with that this year. So this is now a total population survey, which makes some of this data really, really interesting, I think. So subscription video on demand is the most popular category, by which we mean Netflix, Disney, Prime, the streamers. So that's not a surprise, and that's been consistent over the years. Second, which possibly is more surprising, although it is consistent with previous years, is retail. Continues to be of interest, as it was on the Media Odyssey, where we were talking about how retail is playing a prominent role, not just as a bundled service, but also as a subscription in its own right. And we'll come back to the former later. But here we see retail, and this will be Amazon Prime, Walmart Plus, Tesco Club Plus, these loyalty schemes where there's a paid for element as a retail subscription. Music, unsurprisingly, third, but almost half the size of retail, which maybe is surprising. And then there's a long list of other subscriptions, and we're highlighting AI here because there's a lot of debate around AI subscriptions. Is this a boom? In fact, this is only the second time we've tracked AI, and it has grown significantly. But remember the change of methodology. So this time we're saying of the total population, how many people have an AI subscription? And it's 1 in 10. So 1 in 10 of us are paying for an AI subscription, which is significant. When we think about ChatGPT with 900 million weekly active users, Gemini, similar monthly active users, clearly there's a big gap in the total usage and those taking a paid subscription. But nonetheless, it's creeping up there as one of our more favored subscription categories.
Thank you, Giles. And also to the audience that are watching, if there's any questions about particular data points or any moments in here where you've got any particular queries, or you actually want to challenge some of this data, feel free to just put that into the chat. We've got time at the end as a bit of Q&A, and we'll be more than happy to kind of cover those off throughout. Yes, Giles, I think it's really interesting. And I think I really like this particular chart as well, because obviously we work in the kind of indirect subscription area and powering that indirect market. It was really interesting to see the kind of the split between getting a subscription through a website, through the direct app, through the app store, versus looking at through different channels. So this could be through your telco, through your bank, through your retailer, through your connected TV provider, all these different kind of channels where you're subscribing to a subscription through. That's what we're measuring in that kind of indirect bucket. So out of that total in the US, the 5.2, 1.9 of those, 37% are through indirect bundles. And on the UK side, out of the 5.7, it's 42%, so slightly higher, but it all tracking kind of the same amount. And I think if you look at the data that we've shared before from our friends from Omdia, they say 30% of SVOD is bought through wholesale, through channels, indirect bundles. So it tracks, in line with what we're seeing from other providers as well. Any comments here, Giles, on these particular ones that are interesting for you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they're consistent, these two nations, over a third of subscriptions coming through indirect channels. And I think this is probably a theme that we'll see throughout this report, that it's getting easier to buy subscriptions through other channels. So dial back a few years, your only option was subscribing through a website or through the App Store. Now the options are legion, as you just went through. Many of us are getting a subscription included within another service, so mobile plan, but also there are marketplaces and other means of getting subscriptions which are opening up. And this is really leading to this number of over a third of subscriptions now coming through indirect channels and bundling.
Yeah, and I think this next theme that we're going to talk about, I'll let you talk about this one, Giles, is talking about price and price sensitivity. And I think this is something that was really interesting that came through from the report. Do you want to talk us through what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so now we're digging into some of the really surprising data, I think. So 25% of us, or 1 in 4, is spending more than we can afford on subscriptions, which rises to nearly a half of Gen Z. And as I mentioned before, that happens pretty much with all these stats. They're all higher for Gen Z, in some cases millennials. This middle stat here is the showstopper for me anyway. This is the biggest stat of the whole report. Just 2 years ago, 2024, we asked a similar question. 78% of subscribers told us that they strongly objected to paid subscriptions featuring ads. Now, if you can remember back in those days, that was when we were signing up to Netflix, and our mindset was, I'm signing up because there's no ads. It's a different type of service. Now, add in the complexity of the subscription economy. There's a lot more subscriptions. They're getting more expensive. We're trying to figure out how to afford all of this stuff. The data now is showing a complete behavioral reversal here. So 36% of people would tolerate 2 times more adverts for lower cost. That's extraordinary reversal. So we've gone from absolutely no ads to actually I'd take some more ads if it meant it was cheaper. And that rises to nearly half for millennials and Gen Z. So a complete reversal from, and you know, we're into behavioral economics. That's an extraordinary turnaround when it comes to attitude towards ads. And then one that we thought we'd all moved beyond but haven't is password sharing. 20% of us, or 38% of Gen Z, or actually half of students, are still sharing their password. And 19% don't even know who it is that's using their password. So password sharing is still very much a thing. So this is really talking a lot about access and our attitudes towards access, and how people are finding workarounds to get access to subscriptions that they can no longer afford.
And that password one obviously is depending on people being honest, if they want to be honest in this area about that. So that could actually be a little bit higher as well, which is interesting. The next key theme I really want to talk about is loyalty. I think this is a really interesting area that we've seen and wanted to know a little bit more than what we have done in previous years. This particular area is kind of focusing a little bit more on, I suppose, subscription video on demand, because we're talking around shows. And I think, Giles, you're going to talk a little bit more in detail as we kind of go an extra step further than that. But what we've observed is kind of that loyalty is kind of changing a little bit more onto like looking at more at the shows. So like, for example, I'm a fan of say Stranger Things, and I really want to watch that next episode. And I'm really kind of like tied to that particular show, right? That's where my loyalty stands. So in the data here, 59% saying that I'm loyal to the show that I like, not the provider. So it's an interesting dynamic change there, really. And on the right-hand side, this I thought this was quite fascinating. So over a third can't remember which service they actually watch the show on, and that rises it to nearly half for the younger demographic, the Gen Z. So it's, you know, people forgetting where the show is. You know, is this kind of the kind of subscription provider brand loyalty is starting to slightly weaken? This is what the data is kind of showing us. I think it's really interesting. Giles, do you have any comments on this before we move on to kind of some examples of this?
Yeah, I think content is king is a kind of phrase that's been around for forever, and we're seeing that here as well. But it also shows you the job that the subscription brands need to do to keep surfacing their shows so that people can find them and come back. So it's really interesting. And I think we're going to see in a second the showstoppers from Stream TV. Okay, so I discussed this with the audience, and this is some remarkable stuff. So bear in mind, HBO Max just launched in the UK about a month ago. Here's an interesting challenge. So we asked the respondents in the survey if they could identify where Game of Thrones and House of Dragons come from, or House of the Dragon?
House of the Dragon, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. So 18%, only 18% correctly identified them as HBO Max shows. Half of them thought those shows were on a different service, and a quarter of them thought they were on Netflix. So these are flagship shows from a massive new streaming service, and a quarter of people think it's on a different service, or a quarter think it's on Netflix, and half think it's on a different service, which is extraordinary. But it's not only HBO, right? We asked about Star Wars Andor. 20% could correctly identify that it was from Disney Plus or available in Disney Plus. And then Severance, the flagship from Apple TV. 13% correctly thought Severance was on Apple TV. Now, the ones who are scoring the best on this were Netflix with Stranger Things. So we did ask your question, and 44% of people could correctly, and this is total population. So actually, I think that's pretty decent. 44% of the total population could identify that Stranger Things was available on Netflix. But if we think about the amount of advertising and promotion that Netflix do around their shows, it really does show that they're constantly trying to push people back into their service and make sure they can find the content that they love in their shows. So really interesting implications for churn and churn prevention, but also really highlights the importance of discovery.
Yeah, so Discovery, I think you wanted to talk about this one a little bit more detail as well, because this is kind of showing this kind of overwhelmness, right? Of, the overwhelming feeling of, I don't know where I can find things to watch, right?
Yeah. So a third of people are spending longer finding than watching, which, I mean, that's a terrible problem, right? That's the massive discovery problem. This is the one that caught Evan's eye. 29% are spending 30 minutes plus browsing, rising to half of Gen Z are spending 30 minutes plus looking for something to watch, which is amazing. The numbers are slightly higher in the UK. Can't really explain that, but there we go. A quarter are abandoning shows after 3 episodes, and 25% feel they've run out of things to watch. Now, these are all discovery issues. One, it's showing people where to find the stuff they want to watch, and the other is constantly showing them there's new things to watch. The run out of things to watch immediately translates to churn, if that's the case. So it's really important finding here to remind us to constantly drive content that people love to them in a way that they can easily find, and then go on to subscribe and watch if it's a new service to them.
Yeah, I think Discovery is one of these that we really want to talk about a little more as well here in this particular slide, because it is definitely changing. It's moving, right? And some of the stats here I thought were interesting. I mean, I've used some of these myself, right? Using recommendations rather than searching for them. So this is punching in maybe some prompts into GPT or Gemini as I want to watch something that's similar to this, suggest me something like that. I've done that multiple times, and it's becoming more of a norm to be able to do that. And voice control, right? I mean, the TV is still the centerpiece in the lounge, in the living room, in that space, and a lot of people with connected TVs now have voice control speaking to into a remote control. I'm sure your kids do this, right, Giles?
Yeah.
At home.
Yeah. 9-year-old picks up the TV control, immediately speaks into it, and they say the magic word YouTube. And then they're off and running, actually. And the discovery in YouTube seems to be a superior engine to other services, because they rarely touch it once they're in, which is kind of an interesting thing. But yes, this data here is really a set of data that we wanted to explore, to look around the corner, as I mentioned earlier, to try and find out what's happening next, what's changing. So 22% would let AI decide what shows, films, or music to watch. There's an excellent example from Google TV, where you've got a pair sitting in front of the TV, and they have different interests, but the Google TV already knows that, and it just presents something which it knows will work in harmony for both of those users. I tried the new Netflix beta AI the other day with mixed results, actually, but that's a tool which I think will be super useful. I'd love to be able to, switch on the TV. It's looked at my viewing history. Perhaps it's understood what I got to the end of, perhaps things I've watched 5 times, like The Big Short, and it will find me other things like that. So using AI to find what shows to watch. The next one's an absolutely killer stat, though. 20% would let AI automatically subscribe, manage, and unsubscribe them from services. I think that's a real dream endpoint there for AI. Not only does it understand what to watch, it also understands what platform it's on, and then it subscribes or unsubscribes for you in the meantime. That would be an amazing user experience. And then there's some stats here for AI would suggest better content than you could find yourself, and twice that for Gen Z. So really interesting. I think this is the future, AI search. Our friends at Liberty Global have got a super search tool now, which is using AI to help find content. And I think this is the future.
Yeah, and also, just again, another plug on another report that we released just before Mobile World Congress. Do check it out, right? We talk about 3 market forces that are powering, and AI does play quite a good role in the kind of discovery aspect, which we talked about here. Definitely worth having a look at that. Yeah, so what we're looking at here is kind of how to win in this kind of market, right? How can we get to a point where you're the chosen provider, you're the one that's going to be the provider of choice to be able to manage these subscriptions and sign up to them and kind of live in that space and own that area. And I think these are two stats that really kind of point to taking action, right? That this is the area that you should really focus on. 31% saying that they're done with standalone subscriptions. Now that is huge. That is kind of, I will only get mine through my chosen partner rather than through the .com or through the App Store. That's a huge stat there. And I think this expectation now, nearly half and even higher in the UK, there's an expectation that subscriptions are now part of, bundled with, free, given away with, however the promotion is run, with that first party service through your broadband, through your fiber, through your banking, through your new banking tier, something like that. So nearly 50% saying that there's an expectation. So this is a really kind of highlighting where, if you're the easiest to find, to buy and bundle with, you're more likely going to kind of benefit from the acquisition and also then the loyalty of keeping in there.
Yeah, I think if I can just add, I think this is a kind of unintended consequence of everything becoming subscriptionized, and the expectation being you have to come to our website to buy it. What we're seeing now is the kind of reaction to that is, whoa, too many, I'm overwhelmed, I need help. And if you solve that problem for me, that's going to be super helpful. So when we put that question in, I'm done with standalone subscriptions, I would not have imagined for a second we'd get nearly a third of people saying that they're really pushed to express in that way their reaction to standalone subscriptions.
So Giles, you're going to talk a little bit around kind of, how bundles can play in the acquisition space, but also the retention space as well.
Yeah, it's super interesting where people expect their subscriptions to come from. And it has been consistent throughout our reports that telco comes out on top. And with that comes loyalty. So 62% would be more loyal to a telco that helps them save on subscriptions. And they would also switch provider for discounted streaming. So in previous reports, we've looked at the motivations for going indirect, and usually it's something was free, it was easier to buy, or it was cheaper were the top 3 reasons to go indirect. And I think this is kind of reflecting that same sentiment here. But the loyalty bit's really interesting, because what it shows is if you give customers a great experience, which can include simplification of adding and switching between subscriptions, but also a discount, then you're going to be rewarded with loyalty. So this becomes a retention tool. We've talked earlier on perhaps about acquisition, so how subscriptions and subscription bundling can help with acquisition. It also helps with retention. Yes, and here's the data as to where subscription bundles are coming from. So we mentioned before telcos, so mobile phone provider comes out on top, TV satellite cables in there, broadband a little bit further down. So that's kind of what here in Europe we would call a telco. That always comes out on top on these surveys. The interesting one is retail. I mentioned before that retail's got this curiously significant role in the subscription economy. So on the one hand, the subscription to a retail loyalty card typically is the second most taken subscription. Here we see retail as the second most likely place where people get their subscriptions from. Now that bodes well for loyalty schemes to offer subscriptions, and we've seen Walmart Plus, for example, gives a choice of Paramount Plus or Peacock. So and that will in turn drive loyalty, increase the data, increased consumption of the first-party service when they do that. So really interesting where subscriptions are coming from, but it's not just those three: social media, payment and wallet providers, all the way through utilities, banks. There's a lot of different players coming into subscription bundling as the subscription economy matures. Bundling performs so many roles. It's not all, one trick pony. Acquisition, retention, differentiation can help people trade up through tiers. We're seeing that with the Revolut Bank. They're using subscriptions to trade people up to higher and higher paid tiers. So there's a lot of different ways that bundling is being used to achieve pretty serious strategic objectives. Yes, and then the evolution of subscription economy. We've talked about this a little bit. So initially, subscriptions were sold principally through the App Store and then through branded websites. What we're seeing now in the middle area where we are now is that telcos, retail, banks, and other aggregators are coming into the game. So they're offering subscriptions, either in ones or twos, or actually creating entire marketplaces to house subscriptions. And what we're seeing into the future, particularly with some of the answers we've seen about AI discovery and the willingness to let AI find and subscribe your subscriptions, is we're going to see AI and agentic discovery also lead to the purchase of subscriptions. And when that happens, it becomes a really interesting question as to who owns that relationship, whose agent are they using. So the players today, telco, retail, banks, and other aggregators, and then in the future, who are going to be the ones that develop this kind of agentic discovery and continue to own that customer relationship. So very interesting times.
I remember on this slide in Mobile World Congress when we brought it up and you were presenting, Giles, and all the phones came up. It was like in synchronization, like to take a photo of the slide. Really, obviously, in a mobile event, it's a really interesting way of kind of thinking about this. Yeah.
The role of AI in mobiles. Yes. So as we think about what we've just seen here, we're coming to the end of this presentation here. We've seen an evolution of attitudes towards subscriptions, attitudes towards content discovery. Content is king. Where can I find it? And we're seeing in the background to this, the types of subscriptions that people are being offered becoming more and more complex. For example, we have multi-party bundling going on. So this is where two or more subscriptions are being packaged together and sold in a single price. This is fairly complex stuff to do behind the scenes. We're also seeing the ability to switch between tiers. So you may be on an ad tier and you may wish to remove the ads and then come back down later. This kind of complexity is now becoming fairly common in the subscription economy. And these are some of the challenges that we're trying to solve with the digital vending machine and try and anticipate what's next. So we're constantly evolving our product, which is called the digital vending machine, to stay ahead of the subscription economy. I should probably introduce it more formally. So the digital vending machine is used by anyone interested in bundling to sell subscription products through a third party. So that typically is, say, a streamer being sold through a mobile operator or included in a broadband or pay TV plan, or the creation of a content marketplace. So we're helping with all of the complexity that sits behind that, so that none of those parties need to worry about it. Particularly useful for some of the newcomers into this subscription economy, like banks and retail. So we can give them all of that capability so that they overnight become sophisticated bundlers. So we're helping with all of this, and we're also bringing together intelligence from across our ecosystem through the data that only we can see within the digital vending machine, and that helps inform decisions to be made around bundling.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Giles, for the insights and intelligence. We've got a few questions that have come through from the audience. Please do keep them coming in. And we'll try and answer them to the best of our abilities. But the first one from Jean, if that's how it's said. Why do indirect bundles work so well? Is it because of a more frictionless process?
That's a great question. Thank you for that.
It is.
And hi.
Hi. Thank you for joining. Yeah.
Add to bill is kind of the simplest way of describing this. It's a bit like one-click checkout, which you'll be familiar with. So with a subscription bundle, you're typically being offered it by a service where you already have a payment relationship. You're paying already once a month for whatever it is, phone, TV, or otherwise. When you are offered a bundle, typically you add that to the same bill. So it's a very frictionless way of paying. So that's one of the reasons. I think it depends on the perspective. So from a content provider perspective, bundling works really well because they're leveraging not just that payment relationship, but also the marketing and all of the customer service and everything else that exists around that entity, whether it's a mobile operator, pay TV, or otherwise. So what we're seeing is the indirect channel, even before you get into discounts and incentives, is actually a much easier way to buy a service than it is to go to a website and start from fresh and enter all your details, put your credit card in and so forth. Far easier if you've already got a bill and you just add it to that bill. So, yeah, thanks.
Hopefully that answers your question, Gene. Feel free to send a follow-up if you're still on the line. A question from Jeff Luther Giles. Are we putting this is a very US term, right? The MVPDs, are they included in that SVOD category? So I think this would be like your Dish, your Sling, those sort of type of guys, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, so what we're categorizing there is the subscription brands. So typically the streamers is what we're talking about, subscription video on demand. So, and what we do is we put in brackets examples. And I forget exactly the examples, but I'm pretty sure it'd be Netflix, Disney Prime, or thereabouts. So it wouldn't include those, but it would include the streamers.
Hopefully that answers your question, Jeff. Thank you very much for that. Oh, you've sent another one as well. Great. So for mobile telcos and ISPs, do we know the split between how many subscriptions are bundled, i.e. free or subsidized, versus paid by the customer? Very good question.
That is a great question. We don't track that data, but I can recommend Antenna. If you, I can see you're on LinkedIn, or the image is suggesting you're on LinkedIn. I would suggest you follow Antenna for that. They got some really great data on this, and they publish all kinds of data about subscriptions and bundling. They don't include telco though. They don't have that data, but they do include the rest of the market. For us, probably the more common form of bundles historically have been the hard bundle, where it's included or on us, you might say. But more and more we're seeing subscription marketplaces or soft bundles or a la carte bundling, where the subscriber has the chance to pick and choose either from a small range or from a full marketplace. And with that comes a sort of sophistication I mentioned before around switching off or pausing and resuming different types of subscriptions, so that you can move around if that's what you're into.
Yeah, more on the kind of management, right, of the subscription life cycle. I think that's the thing that's really key there as well. Thank you, Jeff, for that question. And then so the question's just from someone here saying that why are consumers more willing to now accept ads? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's affordability.
Yeah.
I think affordability is one for sure. I suspect there's something to do with the ad load being different. So in the UK, if we're used to the ad load of a linear TV or regular TV, however you want to describe it, and what you would see on, say, Prime or Netflix, it feels much lower. So even though we're watching ads, we're not watching as many of them. I think our trained behavior is slightly longer, but really we're talking about affordability. So people want to watch all these different services. The difference can be quite distinct between a premium tier, which will be ad free, but it will also have 4K streaming, and more devices can access it, and there'll be more savable downloads, this sort of thing. So the difference between the more affordable and the premium tiers is quite vast now as well. So I think the attitude's changing, mostly driven by affordability would be my point.
Awesome. Well, Giles, I think there's no other questions that have come through the chat. Really appreciate your time on this. Is there any kind of closing remarks from you around kind of from the reports, anything you would suggest, anything new that you've seen in the market recently that I think is interesting and related to this particular topic, or do you want to close it off?
Yeah, I think it's possible to make this all sound doom and gloom, but actually there's a lot of opportunity in here for everyone. What we're seeing with the increased use of bundling as the subscribers get more savvy and know how to find good deals and know that they can access subscriptions, particularly to their favorite streamers, but also other categories we haven't really talked about, the increasing number of productivity, gaming, and AI and other types of subscriptions that are being involved in bundling. It starts to solve more problems for them. The consolidation, the affordability, the ability to sign up to more apps quickly and easily. So, and with that drives growth for everyone, actually. So the subscription brands will grow as this becomes easier, as people find it easier to shop, and the ones doing the reselling will benefit from it as well, because it drives acquisition in the first place and retention thereafter. But clearly there are some issues. We were flagging a lot of issues in here. Discoverability is a big one. And with that comes, how to pay, which is the bundling. So there's quite a few opportunities emerging in amongst what are evolving times for the subscriber and subscription economy.
Another couple of questions have come in while you were speaking, Giles. That's what we like to see, right? So the question here is saying around, other than cost reduction, is there any other motivations for bundling for consumers from a consumer's point of view, right? This is probably ease of use, right? And ease of management, I'd say. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we talked about the kind of three main drivers where it's free, it's easier, or it's discounted. So it's easier one is to do with the add to bill, which was the first question. I can very simply find and add content. Another point there is about discoverability of finding not just the apps I know and I'm pleased to see in a content hub, but also apps I didn't know and are being promoted to me by the reseller, the operator, or whoever's doing the selling. So I think there's a number of different motivations as to why somebody would buy through bundling. In some markets, the very, very sensitive consumers are to sharing data. So it could be as simple as I don't want another company to have my credit cards, and then I don't want to have to remember to go back there to remove it all when I'm done. And that's quite a motivating factor, particularly in Central Europe. So, yeah. Yeah, and that's why I suppose one of the questions we ask is around trust. Who do you trust to have to manage those bundles for you? And that's why you start seeing those kind of mobile operators and banks and these sort of guys coming at the top, because they're a trusted payment provider, right? They're a trusted person that you pay on a monthly event. Yeah, spot on. Thanks for bringing that up, Ben. Trust is like a key word in amongst all of these relationships. Thanks for the question. Thank you very much. I think that was hopefully that's answered your question. Feel free to send a follow-up if needs be. Another question from who's this? Charlie. Are there still big issues and complaints from surveys on cancellation and the kind of dark pattern practices of providers? It's an interesting question, isn't it? I think this really came up. No, I think this is a question relating to how it can be difficult to cancel subscriptions at times. And actually, this is a really interesting point, because through bundling, typically it's very, very easy. So you don't have to go through these labyrinthine ceremonies to try and cancel a subscription or be forced to make a phone call to someone who's then going to try and upsell you or do the best they can to stop you from canceling. So typically when you're getting a subscription bundle through a mobile operator, pay TV, broadband provider, it's a very, very simple process. So you don't get sucked into this. We don't cover dark practices in our survey. We haven't seen it, but it's worth referencing that there's UK legislation change to simplify and make it more obvious when subscribing that there aren't these tricky commitments that you're making. I myself don't like some of the practices you see through the app stores, tiny little X's that you can't close to, get rid of trial periods that you didn't know you were signing up to and so forth. So there are sort of nefarious
or tricky things that go on elsewhere, but usually through subscription bundling. And it comes back to this loyalty, trust, the opportunity to retain customers. You're only going to retain those customers if you delight them. And if you put these kind of tricky workflows in place, so they have to really work hard to either sign up or cancel, it's self-defeating.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's bring it to a close. Giles, thank you again so much for your time and effort into this one. Yeah, stay tuned, everyone. Just if you're following our page, which I imagine you are because you're watching this through LinkedIn, but if you just engage with the content as it comes up, and we've got a whole array of different other sessions on different topics, and also feel free to connect with myself and Giles as well on LinkedIn if you have any particular challenges or ideas, or we can look at doing a show on that. We're more than open to suggestions from our audience. But yes, thank you very much, Giles, once again. And stay tuned, and we'll see you again soon for the May edition of Bytesize. Thanks,
Ben. Cheers, everyone.